Okay, class, this video is going to go over naming covalent compounds. So remember, covalent compounds are between a nonmetal and a nonmetal. And so the rules are going to be a little bit different than they were with an ionic compound, which was between a metal and a nonmetal. So one thing that we're going to have to use with covalent compounds is something called a prefix. And you guys have learned about these in English class. A prefix goes in front of a word to add or change the meaning. So some examples might be if you like something, that's generally a positive thing, it's good. If you dislike it, you don't like it. If you are an honest person, you tell the truth, you do things that are right. If you are dishonest, you don't tell the truth. So we added a prefix, something that comes at the beginning of the word, to change the meaning of the word. We are going to use prefixes to tell how many of each element is present. So we're going to use number prefixes. So just like in math class where we talk about an octagon or a pentagon, we're going to use those prefixes. So here's a list of the prefixes. We are going to be using these a lot. I will give you this list on a test, but you will need to know how to use it. So 1 is mono, 2 is di, 3 is tri, 4 is tetra, 5 is penta, 6 is hexa, 7 is hepta, 8 is octa, 9 is nona, and 10 is deca. Okay, so let's look at the rules here. So the first rule of naming covalent compounds is that we're going to name the elements in the order that they appear. So when you're given a compound, something like maybe CS2, like in our worksheet from yesterday, you're going to name the carbon first and then the sulfur second. Just like in an ionic compound, we're going to change the ending of the second element to IDE. So something like oxygen becomes oxide. We've already practiced that a few times. The new stuff is in number 3. So number 3 says we're going to use the prefix to show what the subscript is. So if we had something like P2H5, we'd have to use a prefix to show that there were 2 phosphorus and a prefix to show that there were 5 hydrogen. So 2 different prefixes. There is an exception. So this part here, this is an exception. If the first element only has 1 of them, then we don't use a prefix. Otherwise, every other example has a prefix. The second element will always have a prefix. So let's look at some examples. I'm going to break it down a lot for these first 3, and then we'll kind of scale it back a little bit for the next 2. So we're going to look at our first element. We're going to do it in the order they come. So our first element is carbon. And there are 2 carbons, and my prefix that goes with 2 is di. Okay. My second element is hydrogen, but my second element, the ending is going to change to IDE. So that becomes hydride. Notice that "ide" ending. And there are 6 of those. So the prefix for 6 is hexa. So now I'm going to put it together. So I'm going to put my prefix first because pre means before. Like pre-party is before the big party. So my answer, sorry you guys, is going to be dicarbon. Notice you guys, no commas, no dashes, no hyphens or anything. It's just one word, no spaces. So it's dicarbon hexahydride. Okay, dicarbon hexahydride. Okay, let's try another one. So my first element is sulfur. And there's only one of these. So this is my exception to my rule. When there is only one of an element, of the first element, sorry, we don't use a prefix. So it's just going to be sulfur. My second element is oxygen, but it becomes oxide. My "ide" ending here. And there are 3 of those, so I'm going to use the prefix tri. So when I put this together, sulfur has no prefix, so it's just sulfur. And then trioxide. Notice, you guys, no commas, no dashes. It's just one word, no spaces. Trioxide. Okay, let's try one more together before I let you guys try a few on your own. So our first element is P, which is phosphorus. And there are 4 of those. So that's going to be a prefix tetra. Okay. And then sulfur, sulfur becomes sulfide. And there are 9 of those. So that's the prefix nona. So it becomes tetra phosphorus nona sulfide. And again, those prefixes go on there without any commas or dashes, no spaces. Tetra phosphorus nona sulfide. Okay, so I broke it down into a lot of parts for you, but you don't have to do that every time once you feel comfortable. So I want you to try these next 2 problems, and I want you can either use the chart above to help you break it down, or you can try it without. So pause the video, take a couple of minutes to try these. Okay, hopefully you actually tried them. So let's go through. So I'm going to show you kind of my thinking on doing this a shorter way without having to write it all out. So I can see that my first element is nitrogen, and there are 5 of those nitrogen. So I'm going to find my prefix for 5, which is penta, and then I'll write the name of my element, nitrogen. Penta, nitrogen. Okay. My second element is fluorine, and there's 7 of them. So my prefix for 7 is hepta, and then fluorine becomes fluoride. So this is pentanitrogen heptafluoride. Okay, last one here. My first element is nitrogen. Since there's only one of them, I don't need a prefix. So this is going to be nitrogen. But that rule is only good for the first element. The second element always has a prefix. So for one nitrogen, I'm going to use the prefix one oxygen. I'm going to use the prefix monoxide. Notice, you guys, that "ide" ending. Don't forget that. There's lots of pieces in covalent naming.